Welcome to the life cycle of the Atlantic salmon. All living things change over time. They grow and develop as they advance through the various stages of their life cycle. In some species, there are distinct differences in appearance and habitat at different stages. Survival of the species depends on meeting basic life needs at all stages. We are going to take a look at the life cycle of the Atlantic salmon. Adult salmon enter many rivers in the Atlantic region during the months between May and October. The salmon that survive the journey up the river arrive at a suitable place to lay their eggs. They spawn in fresh water anywhere from just above the influence of the salt water to the extreme limits of the fresh water. They must contain a gravel bottom with many small and medium-sized stones. The salmon wait until late October, early November when water temperatures drop to about 5 degrees Celsius and the daylight hours grow short. The female turns on her side and moves her tail very rapidly while staying in one position. The action produces water currents sufficient to wash a hole called a nest or a redd in the gravelly bottom of the river. The redd is between 20 and 45 centimeters deep. The male, meanwhile, keeps watch nearby and will fight off any competing males. After the nest is made, both fish hover over it. The female will lay her eggs, and the male will excrete a milky substance called milt, which contains sperm to fertilize the eggs. There are even small parr that contribute to fertilizing the eggs as well. The female salmon lays approximately 1,500 to 1,600 eggs per kilogram of her weight. Of those eggs, under ideal conditions as in fish hatcheries, 85% normally hatch. In the wild, even fewer can be expected to survive. Once the eggs are laid and the salmon have finished spawning, the adults may stay in deep pools in the river over the winter and go to the sea in the spring. They are called kelts, slink, or black salmon. Some kelts, however, start their return journey after spawning and make their way down the river to the sea before freeze-up. The eggs develop slowly in the redd over the winter, and from mid-April to mid-May, as the water temperature begins to rise, hatching occurs. The small fish, about 2 centimeters long, is called an alevin. They feed on the yolk of the egg from which they have hatched. When the yolk is nearly gone, the tiny salmon wiggles its way up through the gravel out into the stream. Now it will feed on microscopic materials. Until the young fish is 5 to 8 centimeters long, it is referred to as a fry. Later on, fry are called fingerlings because the little salmon is then about the length of a finger. As the fingerling grows longer than 8 centimeters, marks appear on its side and is then called a parr. The parr is identified by its dark back and lighter belly, with 9 to 11 vertical bars called parr marks along the sides of the fish. A single red dot occurs between each pair of the parr marks. These markings camouflage the parr while it lives amongst the rocks and weeds of the river. The parr stage continues until it becomes approximately 12 to 24 centimeters in length, when it is then called a smolt. This can take 1 to 7 years, depending on environmental conditions. After 1 or more years at sea, the adult salmon return to spawn in the river in which they were born. A salmon that returns after only 1 year at sea is called a grilse. Some salmon do not return after the first year at sea. These fish return after 2 to 4 years as adult salmon. The most widespread method of aging salmon parr in adults involves collecting scales. Scales can be removed without harming the fish. When clean and undamaged, scales show progression rings similar to the rings on a tree. They tell a story. They tell you how old the fish is, where it's lived, and if it's been eating well. As the salmon grow, new growth rings are laid down in the scale as it gets bigger. The scales with their growth rings can be magnified in order to accurately reveal the life history of the individual salmon. During the growth of salmon, the rings are formed around the center of the scale, which is called the focus or nucleus. It has been determined that these rings are found in proportion to the growth of the salmon. The first rings form when the fish is in its early stages. If the water is warm and there's lots of food, the fish will grow well. The rings will be spaced far apart. This is summer growth. Next are some rings that are very close together. These grow during the fish's first winter. The water is cold and there's very little food. Therefore, the fish doesn't grow much and the rings are close together. This is called winter growth. Based on the information gained from examining scales, it is possible to determine an idea of the present fish population as well as predict future populations. For example, if the current population is made up of 25% repeat spawners, future populations of the river can be predicted. This will enable fisheries management plans to be adjusted if necessary. The large number of eggs laid by female salmon, ranging between 3,000 and 20,000, is the major means of ensuring that enough fish will return to spawn each year for the species to survive. Assume a 4-kilogram female fish lays about 7,500 eggs in the fall. Only 60% of these will hatch. Salmon have a large variety of predators, ranging from eels, trout, and suckers that eat the eggs as soon as they are laid, to loons, mergansers, and kingfishers who feed almost exclusively on young salmon. Even beavers affect young salmon by damming the streams and thereby raising water temperatures. Industries, factories, and farms may also pollute the river or otherwise destroy young salmon. Dams can be obstacles for smolt leaving the river and adult salmon returning to spawn. Of the 4,500 alevin, only 50 survive to become smolts and migrate to sea. Even then, the loss does not stop. Predators eat the smolts during their first few weeks at sea. As the young salmon grow larger, humans capture them with nets, and other mammals such as seals also eat them. Some salmon get lost at sea and never find their way back to the spawning grounds. Of the 50 smolts that left the river, only 4 or 5 return. Low water, pollution, and impassable dams or waterfalls prevent others from reaching the spawning grounds, not to mention humans, which are another huge threat. Although a pair of spawning salmon will lay 3,000 to 20,000 eggs, on average, only 2 of their offspring survive to spawn. Some of the fish fail to find the rivers of birth, others cannot get up fish ladders, others blocked by dams or suffocate in waters with not enough oxygen. The survival of these species now depend on the people who must provide the salmon with water that is clean, rivers that are passable, and protected spawning areas. Now it's time for the activity, the life cycle of the salmon. Then we will move on to the next lesson about migration.
Petrified in a gravel road, 3,000 brothers by my side. It's nice and safe here in the dark.